Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm going to review Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. So this movie is a new fantasy comedy adventure film. It has an all-star cast including Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Justice Smith, and Hugh Grant, with a few other surprising cameos thrown in. Overall, I think the story works pretty well, and I think it really hangs its hat on their performances. There's a lot of good chemistry between these leads, and I do think that their kind of heart and charisma that they bring to the role makes it just a fun adventure throughout. The basic synopsis of this movie, without going into too many spoilers, is you have Chris Pine's character trying to rescue his daughter as well as bring his wife back from the dead, with a lot of fun and adventure and action thrown in between that. I think the visuals of this movie look surprisingly good. I didn't know what to expect. This movie kind of just popped out of nowhere, and I didn't know how good it would look, but I think the CGI effects are very serviceable. There's some that aren't amazing, but overall it looked pretty good. I think the practical effects are really what stand out for me. A lot of the time it didn't feel like they're doing this whole movie in front of a green screen. There are some of those moments, but overall I felt like the sets really felt lived in. You felt immersed into this world. Also pretty well written. The comedy really does pop at times. It's not the funniest thing in the world, and some of the humor is a little, childish or low level, but I think it creates an element that families could enjoy this movie. It does have some kind of slightly graphic moments, but it still stays fun. It reminds me so much of movies when I was growing up, other action adventure films that I enjoyed as a kid, so it kind of took me back there. They don't make a lot of these just fun action fantasy movies anymore, and this one really hit the spot for me. There are some serious moments and lessons in this film. They could have hit a little bit harder, but I think particularly towards the end of the film, the theme of loss and accepting loss really shines through, and some of those moments were some of the best in the film. All the characters bring their own unique elements to them. Chris Pine's kind of this charismatic, suave, likable guy who's always kind of getting himself in trouble. Michelle Rodriguez plays a kind of tougher battle warrior character. It's kind of more of like the straight man to his character. So I think those two worked really well off each other. Justice Smith was really funny as this kind of guy who doesn't have any self-confidence. He's this wizard who just feels like he can never be good enough, but at the end of the day, he brings a lot of really strong comedic relief and heart by the end of the film. Regé-Jean Page is also in this film, who you may know from Bridgerton fame. I liked him a lot more in this movie than I did in The Gray Man. He's actually given a lot more to do, and he's actually really funny without being funny, because playing up against Chris Pine's very goofy character, and he's a very, very serious kind of perfect hero, those were really funny moments. I kind of wish he was in the film a little bit more. He does get a pretty good amount of screen time, but I really loved when he was on scene with all these other characters. These interactions, these like surprise interactions with supporting characters were really funny. There's one in particular with Bradley Cooper. I don't really want to go into any spoilers because it was really surprising and funny how that was integrated into the story. So I do like how we kind of break it up a little bit from not having the same characters the whole time. Hugh Grant kind of plays a villain in this film, and he's been so good at doing that recently. He brings such an odd, kind of off-putting charisma when he does these roles, whether it be Paddington 2 or recently, I had just checked out Operation Fortune. He did a pretty good job on that one as well, so I'm glad he brought that kind of to this role. One of the weaker points I will say is the story is fairly generic. It's not anything that we haven't seen before in a fantasy film. It kind of brings a lot of elements that we have seen before, but I do like that it's in the Dungeons & Dragons framework, and I appreciate that it made it accessible and consumable for someone who's never played Dungeons and Dragons. I have very little exposure to it, but some of the callbacks I had seen and I recognize. I'm sure there's a lot for people that are fans of the Dungeons and Dragons property, but I'm glad that I think a normal person could go into this and just enjoy it for what it is. And that was one of the things I think is interesting about the marketing of this movie is it is Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not like a game. It's like living in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, and I liked that way that they did that for this movie. The movie also has a pretty good score, which helps add to the immersion of being in this world. I think fantasy films in particular have to have pretty solid scores, both fantasy, horror, and even sci-fi to a degree. I think it helps you immerse yourself in this other world, this fantasy element, and I think this movie does a really good job of that. So overall, if I were to rate this film, I would give it an 8 out of 10. Real surprise for me. I didn't know what to expect seeing the kind of the trailers and everything leading up to it, not ever playing Dungeons and Dragons. I like that it skirted the balance of being a fun action adventure while still having some comedy and some hard-hitting moments and just really well put together. So if you check out Dungeons and Dragons, let me know what you think about it. Did you enjoy it as much as me? And have you played Dungeons and Dragons? I'm interested to see what people think that actually have a lot of exposure to it compared to someone like me who's never played the game. So I'd love to see kind of the juxtaposition between those two. So again, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. See you guys next time.